Andrew Hara. I'm here with the deep dive. Remember those? Yeah, we used to do those. I do have another deep dive that we're planning. I just finished writing it. But before that happened, I actually was contacted by the NMSU, which is our local college, to do a presentation on Mildred Pierce, the 1945 movie starring Joan Crawford. And so I presented that film. Afterwards, I led a discussion on it. And because I put in all that work, which the amount of work that I would do for a deep dive, I figured, oh, let me turn this into a deep dive. It's going to be a little bit less traditional. We're not going to have as many pictures. I mean, we're not going to have any video. We're going to have some pictures, and then I'll show my presentation as I'm talking. It's going to be kind of an examination of the movie, but let me know if you like it. Maybe I'll do more. I'm going to do more either way. But yeah, check this one out. So I hope you like this. Welcome to the deep dive from Mildred Pierce. Check out a commercial. Thank you so much for joining us on the Bomb Squad. Please give a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to support our channel, other than that, the best way to do it right now is to watch our movies. We have the boxing documentary Humble Spirits. We have the Mexploitation thriller Borderland about missing cartel money. Those movies are both on Tubi. Also on Tubi and Screambox, you can watch the zombie drama, The Last Ones, and of course, The Empty Space, a cosmic horror about grief and loneliness. We hope you enjoy those movies. Tell us what you think if you do watch them. And of course, you can always follow my other YouTube page, which is my shorts page, to see some short films, or just join us here. Thank you so much again, and please keep supporting the channel. Welcome back, guys, for our very special deep dive on Mildred Pierce and the themes of that movie. If you haven't seen Mildred Pierce, it was released in 1945 with Joan Crawford as Mildred and Anne Blythe as Veda, her daughter. It was directed by Michael Curtis, who went on to direct a little-known movie called Casablanca. Oh, well, let's look at some trivia first. So, it was based on a novel by James N. Cain, and the film was released in 1945, as I said earlier. In 1996, Mildred Pierce was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant and selected for preservation in the United States Library of Congress National Film Registry. That's a lot of words, but that lets us know that this movie will be around forever. When it was released, it got kind of mixed reviews, with a lot of people calling it over dramatic or hyper dramatic. Despite that, it was a huge hit with audiences. Joan Crawford won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in this film. It made more than half of Warner Brothers' profits in 1945. And also, an interesting thing about this is the movie is completely changed. Well, there's a huge thing added, and that change was due to the Hays Code. The Hays Code back in the day was kind of like the rating system, but it was more a content system where they would tell you what you could or could not put in your film if you wanted to show it in theaters. It was, traditional stuff of like no homosexuality, of course. For that time, they would also they were even kind of against having a husband and wife in the same bedroom at night. That's why a lot of the old movies had them in different beds. One of the big things in this movie that affects it is that the villain always needed to be punished. And so that was changed from the book to the movie, and we'll talk about it a little bit later as we go. As we continue, I would say, if you haven't watched Mildred Pierce, I would check it out. This is going to be pretty spoilery because we talk about the different themes, but of course, that's always better if you've seen it. Just to give you a brief overview, Mildred Pierce is about a woman called Mildred Pierce. It's played by Joan Crawford, and Blythe plays her wife, Vida, or her sister, Vida. And then they have another daughter. She has another daughter named Kay, who died years earlier. The movie follows Mildred as she witnesses a murder, and she's trying to kind of figure out the best. She's trying to explain what happened because her kind of boyfriend Wally has been captured for the crime, and so she's trying to explain what happened. And so we get a flashback of almost her entire life as she tells the story of how someone got murdered. And it is her current husband who's been murdered. So she's a prime suspect along with Wally, who's kind of her little boy toy. So let's talk about the themes of Mildred Pierce. So the first big theme is that it is a very feminist movie. This film was made during World War II, and I think that it's interesting that Warner Brothers was kind of trying to cater a little bit more to the women, because what was happening during World War II, other than the war, was that a lot of the men were gone, and women were starting to step up into the role. And Mildred is seen as is very especially for this time, she's kind of seen as a very capable person. Mildred is seen as capable the entire film, but especially at the beginning. Mildred starts off, she's a lonely housewife. She works for her husband. She has these two kids, and she knows that her husband has been cheating on her. But even at this point, which is technically her lowest point in the film, she makes a note of saying that she's always in the kitchen, she's always cooking, she's a very good cook. She always made sure to take care of her family. So even at that point, before the story begins, we see that part of Mildred's character kind of coming to life. And again, for this time, it was very strange to have such a strong female protagonist to be with his mistress. Mildred has to get a job. She stops as a waitress, and eventually she makes her way up to business owner, where she opens a restaurant, and then she has a chain of restaurants. So the whole time you see Mildred really being capable. She's really trying to provide for her kids. That's her main motivation as she's opening these stores to give the kids the kind of life that they would like. One of the things that I kind of wish this movie had talked a little bit more about was Mildred's how hard it must have been at the time for a woman to start a business. I think it would have been interesting. The business in the movie is more kind of seen as a little bit of not it's incidental. Like she's using that, like her motivation is to protect her kids and give them a good life, and the means to do that is to just be a successful business owner, which is interesting. And also, like, it's funny how much is glossed over considering how rare that was at the time. But that's not to say that they don't talk about any of the current society at that time in 1945. The men in Mildred's life, they play the societal role. Like one of the key scenes is when the husband comes to ask for a divorce after leaving because Mildred wants to open her store and she needs to get this divorce. He's like offended that she wants a divorce, even though he literally left God knows how long ago, left her with the children, left her with no capabilities of sustaining herself. She's had to learn how to do all this. And yet he's the one who's offended that she wants the divorce. Eventually, so we also have Wally, which is one of her pseudo suitors. Wally is kind of seen as like the one who really likes Mildred for who she is and who really is there for love. But even then, every time he runs into Mildred, it's kind of like a sexist comment, or like he's always talking about how he wants to take her to bed, which on its own, it's not like the worst thing because he is a love interest. But because of the fact that he's doing it at her job, it kind of shows again the role that women played in this society. And of course, there's Monty, the husband who's eventually murdered, and he's just bad from the beginning. Like when Mildred wants to marry him, it's a marriage of convenience just so that she can put Vita into a full familied structure. And Monty says that the only way he'll marry her is if he gets 1/3 of her business, which is insane, especially now. But it does kind of show Monty does not really view Vita or Mildred or Vita really as equals. He kind of sees them as things to play with. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Then we have this hero villain story. Let's talk about it. So the film is presented as Vita, and the book more so, but there's this looming threat of Veta. Veta is Mildred's daughter, of course, but throughout the movie, she's seen as this kind of force that everyone has to deal with. Mildred's friends call her spoiled; they call her unbearable. At one point, Mildred um, asks Wally for help with Veta, and he's like, "Oh, it's not my daughter. I don't want to deal with her." And I think that kind of sets up a good dynamic of this kind of way that people see Veta and Mildred, and the way they kind of see them differently. Veta on her, to be fair, is the perfect foil for Mildred. She's the only one of the big things about Mildred is that she's constantly like, she doesn't want to appear weak. She always wants to look strong. And Veta like completely takes that out. The first instance is when she has an affair. Veta, like she's trying to tell him, like give him the mom answer of, oh, I don't, it just happened, or we're separating. Don't worry about it. And Veta is like, oh, because he had an affair. And she calls him out right away and he has to address it. But the bigger one is later on when Veta because Mildred, once she starts working as a waitress, she tries to hide it specifically from Veta because she knows how judgmental she is. And Veta eventually finds the work uniform, and she puts Kay in it to dance around in. And Kay doesn't know what's going on. But Vetta's doing it very particularly to show Vetta, or to show Mildred, that like she knows what your job is. And there's a very interesting exchange about that, where Vetta is kind of calling out Mildred in an interesting way. One of the things about this movie and what makes it so interesting and so complex is that Mildred and Vetta's journeys are the exact same. They're going through a lot of the same events, but it's how they're reacting to those events that kind of sets who their characters are going to be. Because it's kind of a growing up, it's a coming of age story for both of them. For Mildred being this kind of housewife who's forced to fend for herself and kind of become independent and capable. And it's also Vetta kind of coming to terms. I mean, because she starts the film as a very young girl, and so we literally it's a literal coming of age for her. Where with Mildred, it's more of a emotional coming of age. Mildred is very proactive, and Vita is very reactive. The best example of this, of course, is that Mildred is starting these businesses. She's doing all this, and Veta is just kind of getting the she's like enjoying the spoils of war, so to speak. Veta is always kind of shown as materialistic, selfish, and greedy, and she's so focused on the life she thinks she deserves. One of the best things about, or one of the interesting things about these characters is that, again, as they're on this journey, Mildred is too focused on the future of making sure that Veta, or Kay and Veta, and eventually just Veta, have the life that they deserve in the future, and that they're set for life, so that they don't ever end up with nothing like Mildred did. And on the other hand, Veta is too focused on the present. She's always, oh, I need this new thing. I need this new thing. I need this money now, or like, I want to go to the store now. I want singing lessons now. And so a lot of that conflict is Mildred kind of trying to supply Veta with the lifestyle she thinks she deserves. And I think that ends up kind of hurting both of them. At one point, oh, and so I do have, if you look at a lot of the critics and a lot of the fans of this movie, a lot of them have a very poor opinion of Veta, and I completely understand. She is, like I said, seen as selfish. She's seen as materialistic. She doesn't really take her mother for, or she takes her mother for granted constantly. And I think that that's an important thing to note. But I think that people are a little too hard on Veta, because we also see that she's like, one of the big things about Mildred is that she's blinded by love. She's blinded by this love and this journey, or this determination to make sure her kids aren't stuck in this terrible life that she had. And so, but because of that, she ends up being kind of neglectful. I think if we talk about the tragedy of reality, is kind of how I describe this film, with both Mildred and Veta living in this fantasy world that they don't really want to escape from. But Veta's living in this world of, she dreams, like she thinks she deserves all these things, even if she doesn't, and she gets mad when she doesn't have them. And Mildred is living in this world of this fantasy where she is unwilling to accept Veta for who she is. And like, that kind of causes controversy, because she doesn't really ever take care of Veta in that way, in that emotional way of kind of showing her what to do. I think one of the main things that Veta ends up missing is that kind of discipline of a parent, that discipline of a mother. And I think that that changes a lot of it. Eventually, you find out that it's Monty who's been killed, and Veta is the one who killed her, or to killed him. Uh, Mildred walked in, so Monty is just as bad as Veta in spending all the money. Again, he kind of sees Mildred as just a cash cow. It's never like he's really that in love with her. He also like uses her money like willy nilly. He's like constantly spending it, and I think it's this thing where he doesn't consider her money real. He considers it like, oh, that's just a woman's money. And so when he's killed, it's because he has gone broke. Him and Veta have made Mildred broke as well. And so Mildred, like, he's trying to sell his half of the restaurants. And so when Mildred goes to confront him, he finds Veta and Monty together. And and so she rushes out in a state, and then Beta tells Monty, like, "Oh, now we can be together." And Monty's like, "No, I don't think so. Like, I'm gonna take off. We were never in love." And so that's when Beta kills him. That's the murder. And so one of the big things is that Mildred does try to cover for Beta. Even at the end, she's still trying to like do what she thinks is best for her daughter. But again, it's another. While it is noble that she wants to do that, there's that kind of juxtaposition of being a parent where on one hand, it's very noble that she wants to take the rap for her, but on the other hand, she's also trying to again stop Veta from ever facing the consequences of what she's done. And again, that's also an important lesson. It's as an important lesson. You can ask any of the parents here. You know, you need to figure out the cost of failure. You know, and I think that's what makes these characters so complex. And I think that's why I don't think it's fair to judge either Veta or Mildred because they're both just kind of products of their environment. Where Mildred is, she lives in this society that looks down on women and she's lost everything. And you see that motivation to make sure her kids do not have that, to have to go through those struggles, especially because she has two daughters, eventually one daughter. Kate does end up passing in an accident that was out of everyone's hands, but that kind of leaves her solely on Veta. And so she's always trying to like build her up. And I think that ends up hurting her in the end just because Veta ends up being this person who takes that for granted. Um, and I think that one of the big differences between the book and the movie is, like I said, the Hays Code caused them to change the book. In the book, there's no murder. Monty's not killed. And at the end, Veta just kind of leaves. Like once she catches them together, she kicks them both out. And like the book is kind of shown as this, or the book is more presented as this kind of, Veta is a big problem, and eventually Mildred finally lets go and finally decides, which is it's not it's not a story that isn't worth discussing, but I do think that the movie's better, and I'll tell you why I think it's better. So in the movie, Veta is they eventually find out that it's her, and so they arrest her, and Mildred has to say bye to her as she's kind of let off by the police. And I like this better because I like the idea that Monty kind of shuts her down right away and says that she's not going to, or he's not going to marry her. He was never in love with her. He just wanted to, have his fun, so to speak, and that's why he's killed. But I think, and we see that, we see this society where it's like these are the things that Mildred had tried to keep from her daughters, the way men are, the way men see women, and the way that men treat women. And I think Veta has constantly been on the outskirts of this, like she always sees men as this kind of this gateway to escape. Like at one point she gets married, which is one of the worst things she does. And she claims that she's pregnant, and so she gets the husband to give her $10,000 to go away, and and Mildred again like covers for her. She takes the money, she rips it apart. So there's legal repercussions to lying to your husband about a pregnancy, and so Mildred kind of covers for her then. But that's also reinforcing the fact that Mildred never really lets Veta take responsibility for the things that she's done and the actions that she's done. Even like her little selfish things. It's always in protection of Veta. And so by the end of this, once she's led away in handcuffs, like she tells her mom that she'll be okay, and they have one more embrace. But I think it's in that scene where Veta finally realizes that the person who looked out for her most is the one that she was constantly trying to push away. Her mom has been the one covering for her with her husband, trying to cover with the murder, trying to give her the life that Veta thinks she wanted and the life that she thinks she needed. But so it's not until it's too late that she realizes that, oh, this is what I always wanted. And so I think in the book, where Veta is more of a problem that needs to be solved, in the movie it becomes this kind of tragedy, like I said, this tragedy of reality, of this tragedy of these two women who are just trying to do what's best or what they think is best, and how those collide, and how you can do everything you can as a mother and still fail. Like I think sometimes you have that nature versus nurture thing. And that's definitely one of the themes of this movie. And it's kind of left up to you whether that it was always like this or whether it was a product of Mildred's work or what it was. But I think it tells a more complicated story about how far a mother would go and when a mother needs to let go. And I think in the book, she does that too. She kicks her out. But I think in the movie, it's more of a realistic way of letting go of your child because, of course, she can't go with her to prison, but she does seem to want to be there in the background to kind of still help her if she can. And I think that makes for a very interesting film. And I think that with Joan Crawford's acting and with Anne Blythe as Veta, I think she's one of the best actors in this movie. Playing a child to an adult can't be that easy. But I think it all comes together in a very interesting way. I think that if you haven't seen Mildred Pierce, this is a good movie to watch, especially if you're trying to get into feminist themes in 1945, or you just want to see some really good acting. I think it's one of those epics that really works for the time, and it even works now. Right now we're still seeing the need for feminist stories and for feminists or for strong independent women and to show why it's so important. So even though Mildred Pierce is from 1945, it still ends up being a very timely movie. And I think either way, the idea that your loved ones, like going too far for your loved ones or not letting them or shielding them too much from the world, is an important theme to have. And I think that that's an interesting theme. And so I do recommend checking out Mildred Pierce. And I hope that when you're watching it, if you haven't seen it already, come back and then watch these themes and see if you agree with them, because you don't have to. But if you have already watched it, let us know in the comments what you think and if you have any ideas more so on expanding on the movie. One of the things that I think in this discussion of themes that we don't really talk about is Kay. And Kay ends up kind of being the heart of the beginning of the movie as this kind of young, innocent child who's like outside of their battle between Veta and Mildred, and her loss, I think, is one of the catalysts for this kind of cat and mouse game that these two end up playing. And so, yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out Mildred Pierce. I hope you like this. If you've seen the movie, I hope you've liked this discussion of it. If you haven't, I hope this has inspired you to check it out. And yeah, we have another deep dive coming soon that I have already written. It's about the Hannibal Lecter series. We have our Halloween one. I keep promising this one. I'm hoping to get it done this year. So yeah, check it out. I hope you like this deep dive, and we'll see you. Oh, and we also have the Bomb Squad podcast. If you haven't seen, that's the podcast we host. It's every week. We talk about underrated and overly hated and underrated movies. So if you have, we've talked about Freddy's Dead. We've talked about, right now we're in the middle of our banned movie series where we talked about Poughkeepsie tapes. Coming up next week, we're going to be talking about Behind the Mask. So check it out. If you like this deep dive, check out some of the other ones. The other ones go in a little bit more depth. This was more of my presentation, and I did hit the time right, so we should be okay for tonight. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this discussion. And we'll see you guys next week, or next time on the Bomb Squad, next week on the Bomb Squad, and next time on the Deep Dive. I'm Andrew Hara. Check out my movies, and I'll see you next time.